Okay, so this is just going to be a quick live stream today. I don't know if you saw this, but we had a new Studio One version 6 announcement today. And of course, I've been following that to see exactly what's happening with it because while I mean, people consider Studio One a competitor for Logic, sure, and it's actually one of the newer workstations overall. It doesn't have quite the long history. But I'd like to see what this team does with their tools because they seem to be adding things in over time as they see the need for them. Instead of the approach where they've had all of these features for, decades and decades, and they don't want to get rid of anything, but they're still trying to add stuff. That's kind of the Logic approach in many ways. We have a lot of stuff that's been here for, an eternity, and so they're trying to add stuff around the existing features, whereas Studio One kind of has a blank slate to a certain extent. So I watched their presentation, their video announcement today with this, and it was interesting. I think that for the most part, some of the things that the people seem the most excited about as being revolutionary are things that were a little bit of a head scratcher moment for me, but they did seem to have some really cool things. And so I thought I'd maybe go over a few of those just to give you my perspective on them. For the most part, I own a copy of Studio One and I've used it and I really like some of the ways that they're doing things. But there's a few things that have always held me back from adopting Studio One as my main workstation. One of those things, of course, would be immersive audio, surround sound. It just doesn't do it. It's just a stereo DAW. It doesn't seem to ever have any interest in expanding out. And even though we have so much going on with spatial audio and Dolby Atmos, PreSonus and Studio One has said, forget that, we're not interested. Or maybe they're interested behind the scenes, but if they released version 6 of their software without any form of surround sound, then perhaps they're going to own this one until the end. So that's one of the things that's always kept me away from them. The other thing was, even though some people claim the Midi is better in Studio One, it doesn't do everything I want it to do in the way that my brain wants it to do it, and so that's always held me back. And the drummer track, I'm going to be perfectly honest. In my songwriting and production, the drummer track is pretty critical, and not having to always upgrade a third party drummer or something else. So that has held me to Logic a lot. So one of the things that I thought was the funniest today, they were talking about these. Let me go back up. These little icons now you can put at your track headers, and they're like these single color, stylized images of instruments and things. And of course, that just made me laugh because it seems like that is not something that is, something to be really super excited about. I guess if that's something that's on your plate, that's brand new for you, sure, but so many other pieces of software have done that. And so they even look like the Logic ones in many ways. And I just thought, wow, this seems like a copy of Logic features a little bit. They were also talking about when you make a new project and some of the dialogue things that pop up, and theirs seems really clever. The way that you can say, what do I want to do in my project today? So do I want to record or do this or do that? And then it creates a template based on that. But certainly, I don't know if that's a mega draw for me for that software either. Um, they added a few new plugins, which I think bring it up to the standard of a lot of other workstations. They touted adding a de-esser, cool. They touted adding a vocoder, which Logic is in dire need of a new vocoder. The vocoder in Logic is like pretty old tech, and it sounds old. And things like the Reason new vocoder and Reason sounds incredible. It's one of the best I've ever heard. I haven't heard the one in here, but the demo they did in their video sounded so bad. Um, it's like they were saying you could do this stuff with this grid. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. And with they put it on a drummer or a drum thing right here, this vocoder, and it just sounded, at least the demo they were doing. I don't know if it's how it's going to sound all the time, but it sounded like a Logic vocoder for sure, or almost worse if that's possible. And so old tech, not new tech for that. In terms of the other things, let's see. They had the new Pro EQ3, which is following a trend of having like dynamic equalization. It still doesn't reach what Eventide is doing with breaking apart the different parts of the sound and being able to EQ the tax as opposed to the tone parts of the sound, but it still beats out almost any other just traditional EQ for some elements. And so the new Pro EQ3, I mean, it does look super cool. So I think that that's really interesting. And then I didn't see too much with Ampire state space models of classic guitar and bass rigs for uncannily realistic recreations of your favorite tones. Cool, cool. I mean, everybody has some sort of favorite guitar amp emulator. Even in Logic has several different things going for it. So, cool. That's cool. Um, Virtual instruments and sounds. I didn't talk too much about that in their video, but it looks like they're now doing MPE support, which welcome to the party, Studio One. Let's go back up a little bit more here. There was, let's see. Okay, so they always talk about their drag and drop functionality, which is nice. It's cool, but I mean, it's not going to slow me down in a work session. I mean, introducing the video track. So now they can do video projects. Ironically, they can do video projects, but not surround sound. So nobody in post-production is ever going to be using this tool still. Not that they were before, they still won't be using it because you need multi-channel audio to do that, even for basic television or documentary films that are going to be shown in film festivals. Those are all require surround sound. But instead of giving us the audio parts of video, they allow you to import unlimited video clips. You can edit them, you can copy and paste and slice them up. And great. There's not a single video editor on the planet that's going to switch over to Studio One to do their video editing because you can't do anything else. But if you're a video person and wanting somebody to do the audio portion of it, you don't want the audio portion to have the editing capabilities because you're not going to want to remove frames. You're not going to be able to export your audio back into your video editor. This seems like a nice idea for like 1% of the time. And all of the rest of the time, this seems like a horrible design, misguided design. It's not a mistake, but it's just why? Why? I mean, maybe somebody's watching this can tell me, what they need that for. But I mean, I can't do any of the other editing with video. I can't do stabilization or color correction. I can't add any sort of stylized effects. So why do I need to slice up a video and put it all together in my audio editor? It's just mind-boggling in some ways, but cool. I mean, they thought, we could do that. Why not do it? We can be the only audio editor that lets you edit your video, which isn't even true, but it's certainly one of the few that can. On the other hand, the new lyrics track. This seems right on target with Studio One's kind of ethos, where they have like the chord track, right? And with the chord track, they allow you to do some really cool things. And they said, let's expand that, make a lyrics track. And so I think that that's actually super useful to be able to put your lyrics in there. It does sound like a bit of work because you actually have to match them to the Midi notes. And so you probably have to spend quite a bit of time on that. Now, frankly, in Logic, for instance, We might not have a lyric track, but we have the notes, which pop up right here, and you can type in your lyrics, right? Um, hello, right? So we have our lyrics, but we also have one thing that they were talking about with Studio One is the chord track, not chord track, like the arrangement. And of course, in Logic, we can do our arrange track here, which is pretty handy. And let's just do a quick drummer here so you can see. This populates the drummer with the parts of the song that match. And if we want to try a different arrangement, we can just drag our things here and it actually moves everything below it. Automation, the files, audio files, MIDI files, it moves them all around depending on how we're doing this. So you can actually do a lot of rearranging using this arrangement track. And so I think that that's actually pretty cool. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. It looks like, okay, cool. My green screen was bleeding through, but I think we're okay. So cool. I mean, they're adding stuff, but nothing that's like revolutionary in many ways. I do like the fact that when you're doing the lyrics like this, that they'll light up differently here so you can see which lyrics are currently being sung. I mean, that seems super handy. I think there's some benefit to that. In terms of the rest of this, it's like beat making tools built in. Cool. Powerful comping tools. I mean, everybody has those now. I love that a lot of these pieces of software, like, ooh, we just got this new comping thing. Ableton just got a comping feature like the last year. And I was like, awesome. For once, Ableton and Studio One are just taking from, Pro Tools and Logic's playbooks. Uh, Not even to mention Nuendo and Cubase, which have done so many of these things first before all of these. But that's cool. So here's the arranger track, which is like the arrangement track in there. Scratch pads. Um, test out remix ideas. I'd have to see exactly what that is. But to me, that sounds a little bit like versioning in Logic. So I come through, I have a project, and I say, let's do a project alternative. I can mess with it and go back to the original project without having to do a separate project at all. Okay, cool. I'd like to know more about, I know some of this in the past, but harmonic editing. Only Studio One features harmonic editing for both audio and MIDI. I'd be interested in learning more about that claim to see if they really are the only one of all of the workstations. Patterns reinvent step sequencing. Yeah, they're the first to have reinvented patterning for sure. Nobody else has that. And then multi-track tools, edit multi-track drums blazingly fast thanks to advanced transient detection, slicing, and time stretching. Again, nobody has that feature either, said I sarcastically. But that's, they're doing it their own way, which is cool. And then we have new channel overview window, which they don't have a good picture of that right here, but it is pretty cool to be able to see all your stuff in one place. It's kind of neat. I think in Logic, the equivalent to that would be the smart controls, which takes key elements from any one of the channel strips and lets us go through and alter those things, even if it's across an EQ, a compressor, a bus. All of those things get automatically populated. I control them without having to like do a ton of stuff. So yes, I think maybe more in depth of that would be kind of cool, even in Logic. New fader flip, of course, most other DAWs have been doing that for a long time. So again, catching up a little bit here for Studio One. Track presets. This is actually kind of useful, but again, I'm glad that we have some of these things in here already, especially when you start doing track stacks. Essentially the same thing. A bunch of tracks go into one place, you save it as a preset. you can load it up. So I don't think that's revolutionary at all, but it's certainly good for PreSonus users for sure. Let's see. Mix engine effects add analog soul to your digital productions with our proprietary mix engine FX plugins that provide state space models of analog consoles for any bus. Cool. Sounds awesome. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. They're really pushing notation again, which to a certain degree is used by those who use it and not by those who don't in Logic. I mean, it's polarizing in many ways. They have a Studio One remote app. Woohoo! So does everybody. I'm curious about some of their live performance things because I do think that they're pushing that a little bit. Okay, so integrated mastering, not new in this version, but certainly one of the most epic features of any workstation out there. I mean, this is the best implementation I've ever seen of a mastering workflow because you can have this mastering project and it takes all these other projects and put them in there. And if you make changes to the original mix, then it just like there's a process to semi-automatically update it in the mastering project. The problem is we don't do this as much as we used to. Sequencing of tracks and such. We're kind of in like a singles haven these days, it feels like, with streaming. People do release full albums, but the focus most of the time is on a few here and a few there. And the album for most people isn't a thing as much. So do we really need a big full mastering engine like this? Maybe. But I don't know how much it's, a deal breaker for some people. And of course, welcome to PreSonus Sphere. The way they want you to buy this is a subscription model. So we're now looking at Logic as one of the last workstations that isn't subscription model. Woo! What? I mean, who thought that would be the case? I think that we're probably looking at a situation here where if Apple were to make Logic a subscription model, that it would lose some people using it. But even more so, what we would possibly have if they want to make everyone pay every month, then hopefully they would give us content every month, right? Because right now what we're short on with Logic is like updates. We're now 11 months since we had the 10.7 update, and we're on 10.7.4. We're 5 months since the last any kind of update, which was a small one. And the only things that they've added this year are some like loops, instrument type sound bundles, and Dolby Atmos integration into Logic. And so, I'm just looking at Studio One thinking, oh man, they got this new cool EQ that does dynamic EQ adjustment. And they got a new vocoder, even if it stinks. I'm even jealous of their de-esser because it's been that long since we've had something new in Logic. And that's the part that's hard pill to swallow for some of us Logic users, is that anytime you attach a piece of software to a major corporation like Apple, we might never see another update ever. You know what I mean? It's possible, but it's unlikely. I think that they still want to sell computers, and the minute they stop selling Logic, I'm going to feel a lot less required to buy an Apple computer. So if I weren't using Logic, if that weren't my main workstation, honestly, PreSonus would be in the running to replace it at this point. Even though it doesn't do the surround sound or have any kind of multi output audio capabilities. I like a lot of what it does. I think that it has some benefits to it. That being said, I don't think Logic is going away anytime soon, and I'm glad I don't have to make that choice. Um, because even though I've seen all these top 10 lists lately coming out on YouTube about which DAW is the best one, and Logic doesn't usually perform at the top of those lists. In part, they say it's buggy, and I'm like, give me a break. It's as buggy as any software out there. That is not more or less buggy than anything else. I mean, it's just not. And I run it every single day and do stuff in it, and it doesn't crash on me as long as I'm careful with which plugins I'm using. Make sure I'm not using ones that aren't compatible or updated. Then it never crashes. It never crashes at all on me. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's certainly not buggy. It certainly doesn't get in my workflow. I certainly run it on sessions with musicians with no issues whatsoever. And so I don't think that that's really the thing. Some people say, oh, it's owned by Apple. And the minute they say that, I stop listening to them because all these people are owned by different people. PreSonus is now owned by somebody else. And so it's like, who knows what the future of this is going to bring and what benefits are going to be coming because they're owned now by a bigger company than they were before. So who knows? I think overall, my assessment is that I'm jealous that PreSonus 6 came out today, and I'm sitting around not waiting because I've got stuff to do, but I'm eager for an update from Logic, and we're not getting one. So uh, when that does come out, hopefully soon, the new OS 10 should be coming out shortly, and we should see a Logic update around the same time. And well, hopefully it's not just going to be some like small features or some really basic things. Hopefully they're willing to at some point do something really amazing with Logic and get people talking about it again like they've done in the past. Because we live in this world where everything's about what's new and what's latest, and when you just let something sit around for a year without really anything important coming on it. And I don't want to minimize Atmos, but at the same time, it's like I was just reading an article before, like about half an hour ago. I wish I could remember who it was that was saying it. Bob Clearmountain, I think, who was like, I think Atmos is going to be gone. Don't quote me for sure, but I've heard more and more, seen more and more articles about how spatial audio is a niche fad that's going to come and go. And I've been saying this now for a couple years. I don't actually use Atmos that much. I use Ambisonics for my own research, but I'm not using it as most of the time the end uh, format for music that I'm sharing with people. I'm always going to stereo, and that's because most people listen to things and want them in stereo, and they don't care about the other thing. And so I don't want to make my life harder by doing something that's really a fad. But the ambisonic stuff I do because I think that there's ways as a researcher that I'm going to be able to help improve the stereo workflow using spatial audio in the production chain. And so that's my angle on that whole thing. And so we've essentially now spent a year with Logic just getting spatial audio for something that is going to sit there and potentially, you know, die out. It's not going to survive, no matter how much Dolby wants it to. And they're the ones pushing all of this. They see it as a money maker, and that's what it is for the moment for them. So, we'll see. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, I'm keeping it shorter tonight. We're about 30 minutes in, 25 minutes in, and that's about all we're going to do. I'd love to hear in the comments what you think about Studio One, if you've used it, if you're interested in it, what you think about the new update. I'll put that ball in your court and see what you're thinking about this. But otherwise, thanks for those of you who watched, and that's it. Talk to you all shortly.